She married a stranger to escape debt, unaware he was the millionaire everyone feared. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character of today's story. Her name was Emma Hayes. She was 26 years old, and her life had been nothing but a series of quiet sacrifices. She worked long shifts at a small diner on the edge of town, wiping counters and carrying heavy trays until her back ached. At night, she studied nursing textbooks in the hope that one day she could earn a degree and provide stability for her mother and younger brother. But stability was a dream that kept slipping through her fingers. Her father's old business debts had not disappeared when he passed away. Instead, they had multiplied, taken over by ruthless creditors who cared little for Emma's tears or her family's poverty. She had sold jewelry, furniture, and even her late father's car to keep the collectors away, but the debts seemed endless. On a rainy evening, Emma returned home to find her mother pale on the sofa, clutching her chest. The doctor said it was stress, exhaustion, and malnutrition all at once. Emma promised her mother that she would take care of everything, but deep inside she knew she was losing the battle. That night, while bills lay scattered across the kitchen table, a black envelope arrived. It carried no return address. Inside was a simple note with words that made her blood run cold. You have 72 hours to pay, or your family will pay in another way. Fear gripped her chest. She could not breathe. And then came the knock on the door. Standing there was a man in a tailored black suit, his expression unreadable. He introduced himself not by name but by a proposition. He said he could make every debt vanish in a single day. He could protect her family from every threat. All he asked in return was one thing. "Marry me," he said, his voice low and steady. Emma's first instinct was disbelief. Who was this stranger who spoke of marriage as if it were a business transaction? He handed her a folder filled with legal documents. 1 year, a legally binding marriage contract. No questions about my life. No interference in my affairs. You will be financially secure. Your family will be safe. The room seemed to spin around her. Marriage to a stranger? A man whose face she had never seen before this night? And yet, the weight of her mother's fragile health and her brother's pleading eyes pressed against her heart. Emma whispered, "Why me?" The man's dark eyes met hers. "Because you have nothing left to lose. And because I need a wife who will not ask why." Her hands trembled as she looked down at the contract. It was all there in black and white. The terms, the duration, the promise of security. Her mind screamed that this was madness. But her heart heard her mother's labored breaths and her brother's desperate voice. She signed her name. And in that instant, Emma Hayes became the wife of a stranger. Little did she know that the man who now claimed her as his wife was Damien Blackwood, the millionaire whom the entire city feared. His reputation was built on ruthless deals, whispered scandals, and an empire of power that few dared to challenge. Emma had not married a savior. She had married a storm. The night closed around her as the ink dried on the paper. The sound of rain against the window mixed with the echo of Damien's words. "From this moment on, you are mine." Emma's heart pounded. She had entered into a union that promised safety but felt like a prison. She could not know then that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her courage, unravel secrets buried in shadows, and challenge everything she thought she knew about love, power, and survival. This was not just a contract. This was a fate sealed by desperation, and Emma's life would never be the same again. The morning after Emma signed her name, the world felt unfamiliar. She stood in front of the courthouse with Damien Blackwood at her side, a man who exuded both danger and control. The legal marriage had been finalized in less than 1 hour. Papers were signed, hands were shaken, and witnesses marked their presence. No flowers, no vows, no gentle music, only silence and ink. When they stepped outside, a black limousine waited at the curb. The driver opened the door without a word. Emma slid into the leather seat, her pulse racing. Damian followed, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. Not once did he smile. Not once did he ask if she was all right. The limousine carried them out of the crowded streets and into a gated estate on the edge of the city. Emma's breath caught when she saw the mansion. Marble columns rose into the sky, fountains spilled into polished stone basins, and tall iron gates locked behind them with a heavy clang. It was beautiful, but it was also intimidating. Inside, the house felt more like a fortress than a home. The walls were lined with portraits of stern men, all bearing the same sharp features that Damian carried. Hallways stretched endlessly, some doors locked with thick chains, others left ajar as if to warn her away. A housekeeper appeared to guide her to a guest suite. "From now on, this is your room," Damian's voice echoed against the marble walls. "You may go anywhere except the west wing. That part of the house is off limits." Emma nodded, though unease crawled over her skin. She wanted to ask why, but the look in his eyes silenced her. Dinner was served at a table so long it could have seated 20 guests. Yet only 2 chairs were set. Emma sat across from Damian, the distance between them colder than the polished silverware. The servants moved quietly, laying out roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, and red wine. Emma whispered a thank you to one of them, but the woman's eyes darted nervously toward Damian before she hurried away. Emma tried to eat, but the silence was suffocating. Finally she spoke. "Why me?" Her voice was soft, almost trembling. Damian set down his glass of wine, his eyes locked on hers. "Because you were desperate enough to agree. That makes you useful." The words stung like a blade. Emma dropped her gaze to her plate, gripping the fork until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to shout, to demand answers. But her family's safety chained her voice. After dinner, Damian rose without another word and disappeared down the corridor. Emma remained seated, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade into the distance. Alone, she looked at the food left untouched on her plate. The mansion felt colder than the rain-soaked streets she had left behind. That night, she lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ornate ceiling. The house groaned with night sounds, the creak of wood, the sigh of wind through iron gates, and once, faintly, a voice behind the west wing doors. Emma pulled the blankets tighter, her heart hammering in her chest. She had thought she was marrying a stranger for safety. Instead, she realized she had stepped into a labyrinth of secrets. Each wall, each locked door whispered of things unsaid, and Damian himself was the darkest secret of all. Emma pressed her hands against her face, whispering to herself, "I can endure this. For my mother, for my brother." Yet, as the night dragged on, she could not silence the question that haunted her heart. Had she saved her family, or had she condemned herself to a cage she might never escape? Days inside the Blackwood mansion unfolded with a rhythm that Emma could neither resist nor understand. The housekeeper delivered schedules written in crisp handwriting. Breakfast at 7, tea at 2, dinner at 8. Servants appeared and disappeared like shadows, always silent, always watchful. Emma tried to adapt, but the walls pressed in on her, reminding her that this was not a home. It was a contract come to life. Every morning she saw Damian briefly. He sat at the far end of the table, reading documents while drinking black coffee. He never asked how she slept. He never asked if she needed anything. He signed papers, gave orders, and left for his office in the city without looking back. One afternoon, Emma wandered into the garden, a vast maze of trimmed hedges and marble statues. She found herself kneeling near a bed of roses, breathing in the scent that reminded her of her mother's tiny garden back home. For a fleeting moment, she felt human again. But then Damian's voice cut through the air. "You are not here to play at being a gardener." "Oh." Emma flinched and rose to her feet. He stood a few steps away, his suit immaculate, even under the Sunday. His gaze swept over her, sharp and unreadable. "I was only remembering," Emma said softly. "Remembering makes you weak. Weakness has no place in this house," Damian replied before turning his back. That night, Emma lay awake, his words echoing in her mind. She wanted to hate him, but she could not erase the memory of a different moment. At a dinner held in the mansion for business partners, Emma had been seated quietly in the corner, ignored and whispered about by the wealthy guests. One woman sneered, calling her a charity case with a ring. Before Emma could excuse herself, Damian's voice rang across the hall. She is my wife. Speak of her again with disrespect, and you will find yourself unwelcome in this city." The room had fallen silent. Damian returned to his drink as if nothing had happened, but Emma's heart had raced with confusion. He had defended her, yet he treated her with coldness when they were alone. Conflicted, Emma tried to find a purpose inside the mansion. She offered to help in the kitchen, but the staff avoided her. She attempted to clean her own room, only to find it already spotless, polished by unseen hands. The only thing left for her was to wander through the endless halls, counting portraits, listening to echoes. One evening, she passed by the forbidden West Wing. A faint sound drifted through the locked door, something between a cry and a whisper. Emma froze, her hand hovering near the handle. Curiosity burned in her chest, but fear kept her rooted. The memory of Damian's warning returned. That part of the house was off limits. She backed away, heart pounding, and returned to her room. But the sound haunted her dreams. The days grew into weeks, and Emma felt the invisible chains of the contract tightening around her. She tried to maintain her courage, reminding herself that every day endured was another day her family remained safe. She wrote letters to her mother and brother, never revealing the truth, only promising that help was on the way. Yet beneath the surface of her obedience, something unexpected stirred. A flicker of curiosity about Damian, a reluctant awareness of the man behind the mask. He was merciless in his words, but she could not forget the way he had silenced a room to protect her. Emma found herself wondering late at night, was Damien Blackwood truly the monster people feared? Or was there another story hidden behind those locked doors? The mansion seemed to whisper back, secrets, shadows, and truths waiting to unravel. And Emma knew she was already caught in their web. The weeks that followed became a quiet war inside the Blackwood mansion. Emma and Damian lived under the same roof, bound by a contract, yet every glance and every word felt like a battlefield. At breakfast one morning, Emma set her fork down and said, "If I am to remain here, I will not sit in silence like a prisoner. I deserve the right to speak." Damian did not even look up from the documents in his hands. "You deserve what the contract allows you. Nothing more." "Oh," her jaw tightened, anger bubbling in her chest. "Then the contract has made me nothing more than a ghost." For the first time, Damian's dark eyes lifted to meet hers. There was no smile, but there was a flicker of something sharp and dangerous. "A ghost does not challenge the living, Mrs. Blackwood. Be careful which role you choose." The exchange left her shaking, torn between fury and something else she refused to name. That evening, the mansion hosted a dinner for influential investors. Emma dressed in a simple gown from her late mother, refusing to wear the diamonds laid out by Damian's staff. She entered the grand hall on his arm, though his grip felt more like iron than comfort. The whispers began almost immediately. "The contract bride." Someone sneered. Another voice muttered, "Blackwood must have gone mad." Emma kept her head high, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. When the mocking grew louder, Damian's voice cut through the air. "My wife will not be spoken of in such a manner." His tone was cold enough to freeze the room. The guests fell silent, shifting uncomfortably under his gaze. Emma's heart pounded. He had defended her again, yet he never softened when the two of them were alone. She could not decide if his protection was duty, possession, or something unspoken. Later that night, as the servants cleared the hall, Emma confronted him. "Why defend me in public if you treat me like nothing behind closed doors?" Damian's expression hardened. "Because weakness is a weapon others will use against you. I will not allow that under my roof." "You call it protection," Emma whispered, "but it feels like chains." The tension between them deepened. Their arguments became more frequent, each word striking sparks in the cold mansion. Yet with every clash, Emma saw glimpses of something hidden. The way Damian lingered at her door some nights, as if debating whether to knock. The way his hand trembled once when their fingers brushed over a shared glass of wine. One stormy night, thunder rattled the windows as Emma wandered the halls, restless. She paused outside the forbidden West Wing, the memory of the muffled cry gnawing at her. Before she could move closer, Damian appeared, his face pale in the lightning's flash. "I told you never to come here." His voice was low, urgent. "I heard something," Emma insisted. "There is someone in there, is there not?" For a moment, Damian looked almost haunted. But then the mask returned, and his tone became ice. Stay out of places that do not concern you. Emma stood her ground, her courage trembling but unbroken. Everything concerns me now. I am your wife, even if only by contract. His gaze burned into hers, anger and something else flickering in the shadows. For a breathless second, the air between them felt charged, as if one wrong move would ignite a fire neither could control. But Damian turned away, leaving her alone in the echoing hall. Emma pressed her hand against her chest, her heart racing. She told herself she hated him, that he was nothing but a jailer dressed in wealth. Yet deep inside, she could not silence the pull, the dangerous spark that refused to die. She was trapped between fury and fascination, and she knew the storm had only just begun. The mansion seemed colder with every passing night, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of unspoken truths. Emma could not stop thinking about the locked doors of the West Wing. The memory of the muffled cry she had once heard pressed on her mind like a shadow she could not shake. One afternoon, while Damian was away at his office, Emma wandered into the long corridor leading toward the forbidden wing. Dust floated in shafts of pale light, and the silence was so heavy she could hear the sound of her own heartbeat. She pressed her hand to one of the old wooden doors. It was locked, as always, but beneath the silence, she thought she heard it again, the faintest echo of someone whispering. Her fingers curled into a fist. She wanted to break it open, to demand the truth, but the sudden echo of footsteps made her retreat. A servant carrying a silver tray glanced nervously at her before hurrying away. Their silence was its own warning. No one dared speak of what was hidden. That night, Emma's curiosity became unbearable. She searched her suite for something, anything, that might give her a clue. In the drawer of an unused desk, she found an envelope tucked beneath old papers. It held a faded photograph of a young woman with gentle eyes, standing beside a much younger Damian. The woman's smile was full of warmth, but Damian's face carried a sadness that even time had not erased. Emma traced the outline of the woman's face with her fingertip. Was this the ghost that haunted the West Wing? A lost lover? A sister? The questions swirled, and each one tied her closer to Damian's hidden world. When she confronted him the next day, her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. "Who is she? The woman in the photograph?" Damian froze. For the first time, the mask of control slipped from his face. His jaw clenched, his eyes shadowed. He took the photo from her hands, staring at it, as if the image carried both pain and fury. "She is no one you need to know," he said finally, his voice sharp. "And if you value your safety, you will not ask again." Emma's heart sank. The sharpness of his tone cut her. But what wounded her more was the flicker of grief she had seen in his eyes. It was the first human crack in his armor, and it made him more of a mystery than ever. The whispers in town only deepened her unease. At the market one morning, Emma overheard two women speaking her husband's name. Damien Blackwood destroyed an entire family, one said. Left them bankrupt and ruined. Some say he drove them to their graves. Ah! Emma hurried away before they noticed her, but the words clung to her. Was she married to a man whose power came from the suffering of others? The thought hollowed her chest. That evening, when Damian returned, Emma stood waiting in the grand hall. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "Are the rumors true? Did you destroy a family?" His eyes locked on hers, hard as steel. For a moment she thought he might deny it, but instead he turned away, silent. That silence was worse than confession. Emma's hands shook. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself. "Who have I married?" The mansion seemed to close in around her, its grandeur turning to prison bars. She felt alone, deceived, and bound to a man whose shadows reached farther than she could see. That night, she lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling carved with gold. For the first time since the contract began, she wondered if she had traded one form of danger for another. If saving her family had condemned her to a nightmare she might never escape. And in the silence of the West Wing, the whispers returned soft, haunting, and unanswered. The storm broke not in the sky, but in the newspapers. One morning, Emma awoke to find the house buzzing with hushed voices. Servants hurried past her door, avoiding her eyes. When she reached the dining hall, a folded newspaper lay on the table beside her plate. The headline blazed in bold black letters. Damien Blackwood's secret marriage exposed a contract bride. Her hands trembled as she lifted the paper. There it was, printed for the world to see, her photograph walking beside Damian, her name tied to whispers of debt and desperation. The article claimed she had married him for money, that the marriage was a sham, a scandalous arrangement. They called her the penniless girl who sold her soul for wealth. Emma felt her chest tighten. Shame, fear, and fury collided inside her. She crumpled the paper in her fist, just as Damian entered the room. "You knew this would happen, did you not?" she cried, her voice breaking. Damian's eyes were unreadable, but his silence was louder than denial. "My family will see this," she whispered. "My mother, my brother, they will be humiliated because of me, because of you." Still, he said nothing. Emma slammed the paper against his chest. "Tell me the truth, Damian. Did you marry me only to use me? Am I nothing more than a pawn in whatever game you are playing?" For the first time, anger flickered in his gaze. But instead of answering, he turned and poured himself a glass of whiskey. The sound of liquid hitting crystal was the only reply. The silence was unbearable. Emma's voice rose, shaking with both rage and despair. "You do not even deny it! Do you hate me so much that you would let me drown in this humiliation?" Damian set the glass down, but his back remained to her. "This marriage was never about love," he said flatly. "You knew that from the beginning." Tears stung her eyes. "I knew it was a contract. But I thought at the very least, you would protect me." She turned and fled the hall, the sound of her sobs echoing through the cold marble corridors. The scandal spread quickly beyond the mansion. Neighbors whispered when Emma stepped outside. At the market, she overheard cruel words. "She sold herself," one man muttered. "She will not last a year." Another voice hissed. "She deserves the ruin that follows him." Her family became the target as well. Her brother called in tears, asking why strangers were mocking their name. Her mother begged her to explain. Emma lied, promising them she was safe, but each word cut deeper. Back inside the mansion, she confronted Damian again. This time her voice shook with fury. "You claim to be powerful, you claim to be feared, yet you let them destroy me while you stand in silence. Why?" He looked at her, and in his gaze was something she could not read. Pain, fury, maybe even guilt. But once again, he offered no explanation. Emma's heart cracked. The man she had once thought a shield now felt like a weapon pointed at her. Every whisper in the city, every headline in the paper, every cruel glance in the market pressed down on her shoulders. That night, she stood by her window, staring at the storm outside. The rain lashed against the glass, lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled like judgment. Emma whispered into the darkness, "I do not know if I can survive this." In the distance, she heard a door slam in the west wing. The echoes mingled with the storm, as if the mansion itself was warning her that the worst was yet to come. The storm of scandal had nearly broken Emma when Damian finally revealed the truth. It happened late one night. She had fled to the library, seeking silence, when she heard footsteps behind her. Damian stood in the doorway, his face shadowed by the glow of the fire. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Emma's voice cracked through the stillness. "Why?" she whispered. "Why marry me? Why let them drag my name through the mud while you stand silent?" Damian stepped closer, his expression no longer the mask of ice she had grown used to. "Because silence was the only way to keep you safe." Emma's eyes widened. "Safe? You call this safety? My family humiliated, my life destroyed." He cut her off. "The people who came after you, the creditors who threatened your family, they are not just greedy men. They are connected to a syndicate that has been targeting me for years. If I had denied the scandal, they would have dug deeper. They would have used you as leverage. By letting the world think this marriage was nothing more than a contract, I kept you out of their direct line of fire." Emma's heart pounded. His words sounded like both a confession and a plea. And the photograph? The locked wing? The whispers of a ruined family? Damian's yaft clenched. His eyes flickered with a pain so raw it startled her. "The woman in that photograph was my mother. She was taken from me because of the same men who now chase your family. The locked wing holds everything that remains of her life. I could not bear to destroy it, but I also cannot let anyone else inside." Emma pressed a hand to her chest, torn between fury and a surge of compassion. "So you married me to protect me, but also to draw them out, did you not?" He nodded slowly. "They wanted leverage. By marrying you, I made sure they revealed themselves. Every move they make now, I can trace back to them. You were never the target I wanted to expose, Emma. But I could not warn you. If I had told you the truth, you would have run, and I could not risk losing you." Her breath caught. For the first time, Damien Blackwood's voice was not cold steel but breaking glass. The man the city feared was, in truth, a son carrying grief. A man who had chosen her not as a pawn but as someone he needed near, even if he could never admit it aloud. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to scream at him for the pain he had caused. She wanted to demand why he had let her suffer in silence. But instead, she whispered, "You should have told me." His hand hovered near hers, trembling but never touching. "If I had, would you have stayed?" Emma's lips parted, but no answer came, because in her heart she knew the truth she would not have stayed. And that realization shook her more than any scandal ever could. The days after Damien's confession unfolded like the slow unraveling of a knot. For the first time, Emma no longer saw him, only as a monster cloaked in wealth and power. She saw the shadow of a grieving son, a man who had carried scars far deeper than the rumors ever revealed. But the danger was not gone. One evening, Damien returned to the mansion with blood on his sleeve. Emma rushed toward him, her heart racing. "What happened?" "They struck first," he muttered, his voice low. "The syndicate knows we are closing in. They will not stop until they are destroyed." Emma's fear for her family returned sharper than ever. "And what about me? Am I just a shield for your war?" Damien's gaze locked on hers. "No. You are the reason I fight." The words stunned her. He pressed a folder into her hands, filled with documents, evidence of fraud, extortion, and violent crimes tied to the very men who had tormented her family. "We take this to the court. We expose them, strip them of their power. Once they fall, you are free. Your family is free." The following days were a whirlwind. Damien met with lawyers and investigators. His name splashed across headlines once again. But this time, the story was different. The world saw him not as a ruthless destroyer, but as the man who brought down a criminal empire. Emma stood by his side through it all, facing the cameras, hearing the whispers of the crowd. She no longer kept her head bowed. Instead, she met their stares with quiet strength. In the courtroom, the syndicate leaders were forced to face the evidence Damien had gathered for years. One by one, their lies crumbled. Their empire collapsed. When the verdict was announced guilty on all counts, the room erupted. Emma's chest filled with a weightless relief she had not known in years. She turned to Damien, whose dark eyes softened for the first time in public. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Damien reached for her hand, his grip steady and unyielding. "No more hiding," he said firmly. "If they want a statement, let them hear it from me." "Oh." He stepped before the cameras and declared, "This woman was never just a contract bride. She is my wife. She is the reason I stand here today. Every whisper against her ends now." The crowd fell into stunned silence before the shutters of cameras clicked like a storm. Emma felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they were not born of despair. They were born of something stronger, something she had not dared to believe in since the day she signed her name on that contract. For the first time, she felt free not because the marriage was ending, but because it had become real. The weeks after the trial felt like a new season had settled over Emma's life. The mansion, once heavy with silence and secrets, began to breathe differently. Servants moved without fear. Windows that had stayed shuttered for years were opened, letting in light. And in the evenings, Emma no longer ate alone at a long table. Damien sat across from her, not as a distant figure lost in paperwork, but as a man willing to share quiet words and stolen glances. One evening, she found herself standing on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. Damien joined her, his hand brushing against hers. For once, he did not hold back. He laced his fingers through hers and spoke softly. "When I asked you to sign that contract, I thought I was building another shield for myself. I never expected that I would find someone who could break through the walls I spent years constructing." Emma turned to him, her voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "When I signed, I thought I was walking into a prison. I never expected to find you." His eyes met hers, and the world seemed to fall away. "Emma Hayes Blackwood," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "This marriage began with ink on paper. But I want it to end only with time itself. Stay with me not as a contract, not as a shield, but as the woman I love." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were no longer born of fear or despair. They were tears of release, of healing, of finally being seen. She whispered the only answer her heart could give. "Yes, I will stay." In that moment, the contract that had once chained her dissolved into something real. The storm that had begun with desperation ended in a vow not written on paper, but spoken between two souls who had both known loss, both carried scars, and both chosen to love anyway. Months later, Emma walked through the same garden where Damian once scolded her for remembering. This time, his arm rested around her shoulders as they admired the roses together. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like home. The city still whispered about Damien Blackwood, the feared millionaire. But to Emma, he was no longer a legend cloaked in power. He was the man who had chosen her when the world thought she was nothing. The man who fought to protect her even in silence. The man who finally allowed himself to be vulnerable with her. Their story had begun in desperation, but it ended in something rare: justice, redemption, and a love powerful enough to rewrite every cruel headline. And so, Emma Hayes Blackwood's life was no longer the tale of a woman who married a stranger to escape debt. It was the story of a woman who found, against every odd, that even in the darkest contract, love could bloom into forever.